Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Civil War Regiments Podcast. I'm really excited. This has been a really fun season so far. I've had a lot of fun guests and opportunities, and I'm really excited today. This is a really a great opportunity. I'm interviewing Mark Maritato. He's an acclaimed historical artist. His work has been featured in battlefields, museums, documentaries, books, magazines, just to name a few. And he's one of my favorites because he really focuses a lot on the individual regiment and battle. And his work extends beyond the Civil War, but he's got a real knack for Gettysburg regiments too in art. And so I appreciate that. I'm a big regiments guru. I'm a big Gettysburg buff. So I'm a big fan of a lot of his work. And I've always wanted to interview an artist to kind of get that perspective. And so all that being said, Mark, welcome to the show, and I'm so glad you're joining me.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for having me on. I really, really appreciate it, and I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, yes, and especially what's behind you. We'll be getting to that in a bit. His newest work, the Brickyard fight at Gettysburg, which is really compelling there. But before we go too far, I pulled out one of my pieces of merchandise from Mark is the 8th Missouri. 8th Missouri Zouaves T-shirt, and the reason I really bought that is me and a bunch of my living historian friends, we reenact the 8th Missouri, and so
Yeah,
several of us bought those shirts in anticipation of that. Like it's a few weeks from now is the big 160th anniversary of the Battle of Resaca, Georgia,
okay.
and so we're doing a big contingent recreating the 8th Missouri. And so I encourage any listeners to come check it out, come see it. It's at the Resaca Battlefield. It's May 17th through 19th that weekend. And so if you see a contingent of guys wearing this kind of uniform, that's the 8th Missouri. And so I was happy to see that you had done a piece on them. So that's
Yeah,
really great.
the Eighth Missouri was interesting because they were technically a Zouave regiment, but they're a Western regiment
Hmm.
at the same time. So they didn't really have a full Zouave uniform. They had the jacket, but pretty much the rest of their garb was pretty much all just standard federal gear.
Exactly, and that's what made it kind of a fairly easy impression. We just had to take the time to get the jackets and make those, and everything else just falls into place.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but it's great. But I also appreciate the guys who reenact a full Zouave kit. Some of those Eastern Zouaves. It's sight to see.
Yeah,
So,
I reenacted for 16 years with the 14th Brooklyn Company
oh
E.
well,
I started with them in 1997 and went through about 2013 was my last. The Gettysburg 150th was my last reenactment with them.
oh wow,
It's just getting too hot and too. I just wasn't able to do it anymore. Uh,
yeah.
but it was fun bunch of years. Really, I've been to some really amazing Civil War reenactment events. I was at the 135th Antietam back in 1997, the 135th Gettysburg, which
Oh
was
wow.
an amazing event, and probably the best event that I ever at was I forget what I think it was the 140th Cedar Creek reenactment in 2004. It was, man, was that a sight? That was a crazy, like you felt like you were there just because of the way
Yeah.
the battle flowed and the reenactment flowed and like the number of soldiers, reenactor soldiers they had at that battle. It was amazing. It was probably the closest experience to a Civil War combat experience that I probably will ever have experienced in my life. It was amazing.
I know there's something about those old school like large scale national events back in the day where
Hmm.
and people could talk about hardcore and farbs, but with that aside, still if you have 10,000 reenactors on the field, it gives you an idea
Oh
of
yeah,
the scale. Even that's a small scale compared to Gettysburg 150,000 men. So like when you
yeah,
have 10,000 on the field and you're recreating brigades and divisions and whatnot, you can get that feel of what it looked like. And I'm sure, and we'll probably talk about this, but I'm sure that plays a part in your inspiration as well,
oh
experiencing some of those things,
yeah.
that visual.
just when you're standing there and you look down, and this happened at the Antietam event. I look down and I see just nothing but just little two lines of Federal soldiers just going back as far as you could see, and that was quite an amazing experience. And then just to hear the volleys of musketry, like the way the volleys of musketry would just like, you would hear how like thousands of muskets would just fire all at once. Just unbelievable experience. One other memory that I'll just share real quick about the Battle of Antietam reenactment is we got up really early to go do the cornfield reenactment. I think it was on a Saturday morning, and they got us up like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they had us marching out in the dark. And as we're marching towards the cornfield, we just see they already started the cannonade, and you could just see flashes of artillery in the sky. These are things that you don't really think about when you're thinking about a Civil War battle. You're thinking like, okay, these. Think about two armies, they come up and they just kind of shoot at each other and kill each other. But there's a lot of other things that are going on that you don't really know about or really can experience unless you actually kind of reenact it. And one of the coolest things that was part of this whole experience was they marched us back. They placed us behind the first line of infantry going into the cornfield. So the infantry line ahead of us was the Iron Brigade, and they were all lined up with their black hats on, and they all had their white leggings on, and it was just starting to get a little light out in the sky, but it was very foggy, and then the cornfield was ahead of them. So you had the line of the Iron Brigade, and then you had the cornfield beyond them. And one of the things I will never forget is just seeing this line of soldiers just start forward, and you see their white canvas leggings just going and then you see these forms just disappear into the cornfield, and then you're hearing them going through the cornfield,
Yeah.
and hearing them knocking down the corn stalks and stuff, and you're hearing the orders of the officers being shouted out, and the next thing you know, you just hear this crescendo of the musketry just open up, and I'm like thinking, my God, this must have been very similar to what you must have experienced during that time. You cannot get it unless you from a book or just anything else, but other than to kind of get out there and experience it. So
it's chaotic, yeah, and you can't see what's in front of you. And in my experience of cornfield fights, it's like you can't see the enemy until you get to like a little clearing, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the corn, this hot firefight opens up, and it's an experience. It's
quite
crazy.
an amazing experience, and
Yeah.
I would encourage anybody who's into it to just try to maybe get into a reenacting group and try to experience, because it really is a lot of fun and a lot of it's just quite an experience.
Yeah. I did an event just this past weekend with the first section, the Liberty Rifles, and we recreated an artillery battalion live firing. It was a live firing event, and it was something, because I've never fired artillery live before, and hearing the shells screaming down the range and hitting targets, like, it was a sight to see and something I'll never forget. And
there's a bunch of videos on YouTube showing like live fire of artillery. It's nuts.
Yeah, I know, and you can't imagine. You're like, oh my gosh, like people would march into that.
Oh yeah.
It's much respect to the guys who had to do that, because just seeing the damages done to the targets was enough to be like, okay, that's pretty rough right there.
You can imagine the flesh.
Yeah. So again, with living history, we get as close as we can to an extent, so we can kind of hear those sounds, and we can hear the noises of what battle may have sounded like. We're never going to experience exactly what they went through.
Yeah.
But we get close in what we're wearing and what we're experiencing, how we sleep on the ground, and all these little things that we can correlate with as close as we can to living what they lived. And so,
and just kind of connecting it to my artwork. Part of the reason why I got into living history or doing Civil War reenacting was to kind of experience what this, as far as you could. I mean, you're a modern person experiencing what somebody 150 years ago. It's not exact, but it kind of gives you more of an idea of what these people experience, and it really gives you an appreciation for what kind of a sacrifice these people back then had to go through to live day by day. It's really mind-boggling.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I appreciate your work and trying to immortalize that in that memory too. Like we don't have photographs and videos of the actual combat in the Civil War, and so
Yeah,
painting, art, and living history are two of the only ways that we can kind of try to visually see and
yeah.
recreate that. And so, um, but before we go further in that, I'd like to kind of rewind a little bit and going back again to where did you, begin all that interest in history and Civil War history, and how young were you, and when did it all begin for you?
All right. Well, how far back do I go? I started. I started drawing from a very young age. When I was really young, I started drawing dinosaurs, and I got really interested in believe it or not, in history with the RMS Titanic. And I was obsessed with the Titanic when I was a little kid. So I always drew the Titanic sinking, or I would draw dinosaurs, and I was also into fishing and drawing fish and stuff like that and wildlife. So I always had done drawings. I'd always drawn when I was younger. Also one of the things too was that I come from a single parent household, and my mom was always working, and we had four kids in the house, so I had to kind of occupy my time with whatever I could. A lot of times I would even make my own toys out of aluminum foil, kind of thing, just to kind of, that kind of helped me with learning how to sculpt form and things like that. So when I got into high school, or when I got a little bit older, I started learning more about like World War II history. I would see documentaries on World War II, and I started getting a little bit interested in that. This is about the time that the History Channel started to show up on cable, and then about maybe it was a little after that, but then around I think it was 89 or 90, I think it was 1990. I saw the movie Glory on HBO, and the first scene where where it opens up, and Robert Gould Shaw or talks about being in the army, and then it just goes right into the scene of the Battle of Antietam. That scene right there, the Battle of Antietam scene, like hooked me right there and there. I was like, "What is this? Why are these guys just walking up like this? Why are they just standing out in the middle of the field? Why are they getting, you know, annihilated like this?" So, and then I watched the movie, and then I saw the other battle scenes that were in this, and I was just the whole movie just really piqued my interest. So when I right after that, immediately after that, while I was in high school, I went to the high school library, and went into this section about the Civil War, and I found the I forget what it was called. It was the Centennial Civil War series, where they had all the battle maps that were all kind of illustrated and
Oh
showed
yeah,
the
yeah.
different showed all the I forget who put the book out, but it was a long time ago, and I haven't looked at it since. But
Was that the American Heritage one?
yes, okay,
Yeah.
that's the one. Yeah, I just think of it. But that book was really interesting because it showed the maps and stuff like that. And then they just happened to have at my high school, they had a copy of William Frazanito's Antietam, A Legacy of America's Bloodiest Day. So I took that out and I read it, and that book really I mean, that book really hooked me because it showed photographs from a then and now perspective. Well, then back then, when the now photos were taken in the 1970s, I believe, but it really showed like a it just really captured my interest, and I started reading more about the Battle of Antietam, and then I found Frazanito's Gettysburg book, and that right there started to hook me even more into doing. So I started doing a lot of drawings in high school of Civil War battles and things like that. Like I would just kind of like just kind of do them, because I was just really interested, and I started getting really interested in the Civil War. Started really study these battles and stuff. Um, it wasn't until college when I got accepted to an art school, which is Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. When I went there, I met another fellow artist. His name was Dan Nance. His name is Dan Nance. He I went into his room. We were staying in the same dorm room, and I remember going into his room with another friend, and I saw he had a Mort Kunstler print up on the wall. It was the one of Jackson. at First Bull Run with all the troops behind him. And I'm like, oh, that's he had a flag, he had a Confederate flag up, and I'm like, oh, that's just a Civil War. I'm like, he's like, yeah, man, and he told me he was from North Carolina and all that stuff, and we started talking about Civil War stuff, and he kind of turned me on to historical art being a thing, kind of thing, and then he introduced me. I kind of knew about Don Traiani's artwork. Excuse me, just take a sip here. I knew about Don Traiani's artwork because I've seen
Yeah.
his work in magazines, and I kind of knew about Mark Kunstler's work too because I've seen his stuff in magazines. And so him and I just started talking about it, and just like we started both doing historical art kind of together at the same time. And since then, I just never stopped. I just love doing it. I just love studying the history. I love studying the regiments. I love studying the battles, and I I I I think people seem to appreciate. It seems like people really appreciate that I'm able to depict these battles in a way that shows them in a very credible form, and and are able to. Excuse me, my throat's a little.
Oh no, you're fine. No, and I will say right here, you're right. That's what the fans and the viewers of your art appreciate is when you have that love, interest, and passion that you're putting into it, and that translates, right? When we see
Yeah.
it, like, oh wow, he spent a lot of time recreating that, making sure like the landscape is right or the line of battle is right. Like that takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of a lot of people have done. A few artists have done, specialize in doing historical art. There are a couple that I really do respect a lot, and those are Don Triani and Keith Rocco. Those are my two favorites. I like Mark Kunstler's work too because he's kind of like an all-American artist. He's done a lot more than just Civil War, but he's known as being an illustrator, and his work is definitely very, very interesting. But the two people that I really look up to as far as being the historical art genre are Traiani and Keith Rocco. There's another artist who I really, really love. Unfortunately, he's no longer around. He's passed away, which is Tom Lovell. And I'm really, really, I've really been influenced a lot by his work in the last few years because his style is he's done a lot of Native American Western art. He's done a few very famous paintings, excuse me, of Civil War battles. Like he did the cadets at Newmarket with the guy on the cannon waving the flag. Like I don't know if you've
Oh
seen.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's a very brushy, very dark painting, but I love it because it's just very
yeah,
well executed. He did a painting of Colonel Robert Gould Shaw at the Battle of Fort Wagner. Very beautiful. And then the 54th Massachusetts at Fort Wagner. Beautiful paintings. If you ever get a chance, look up Tom Lovell's work because it's worth it. He is a master illustrator, and I really love his work. Um,
yeah.
then I also look to older artists such as Winslow Homer, and Frederick Remington and others.
Well, that's great to have so many. Because there you have it. You have books that inspire you. You have movie scenes that inspire you, and I think that there's like two. Glory and Gettysburg came out close. Just a few
Yeah,
years apart, but it seems like each of those movies got a following. In their own right. So people either say Glory inspired them or Gettysburg inspired them, one or the other usually. And one thing I get a lot is I tend to compare that opening Antietam scene in Glory to like the opening of Saving Private Ryan in
hmm
the Civil War movie, Civil War version. That's kind of like the pull that it had.
yeah,
And also I like your tip of the hat nod to so many of these amazing artists, right? Like and so we history buffs have been blessed with so much beautiful art by so many artists. I feel like the '90s was like a heyday for so many of these
yeah,
beautiful art pieces as well,
yeah,
and then those guys, so all of them were inspired by others before them, and you have that a lot of the famous European art, the Napoleonic art that inspired, and there's something just sometimes it could be, the ancient art was over dramatized, right? Or propaganda like in some of those old paintings, like, like famous generals could never be shown in distress, or like, like
Yeah.
there was a lot of that, but like I like the realistic feel, and I love the work that it goes into, yeah, making that landscape look real, whether it's like the puffs of smoke or like the chaff before the wind, if you will. Like there's all that kind of like pulls into it, as well as the sweat on the soldier's face, or like the gun smoke and gunpowder. And so, you know, I love those images, like the one behind you, where it's like it does feel like you just put pause on a moment in time, where you could just, that's what I think art of events tries to capture, is that moment in time where you can kind of feel the intensity of the Confederate battle line coming across the field, or soldiers behind a fence trying to defend the line. And it's really interesting. It's fascinating to me, and that's why I'm a huge fan of so much of the Civil War artwork, because again, that's what we have to rely on. We hear the writings of these men, and we can see documentaries and movies try to recreate it, but the art is trying to like give us that strong
Yeah.
visual.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that that you guys do.
Thank you. Yeah, just to touch on the movies real quick. In my opinion, Glory is the best Civil War movie ever made. Gettysburg was good. I wish they had kind of made it a little later, where they were able to make, treat it more like Saving Private Ryan. But one of the things that drives me crazy about Civil War movies is that they seem to always show Civil War battles as two lines of troops running at each other and bayoneting each other, and that rarely really ever happened during the Civil War. What would happen is the two lines would march up, they would fire at each other, and they keep firing at each other. And yeah, sometimes they would get into hand-to-hand fighting, but it was not that often. It wasn't every single battle. And a lot of times what would happen is they would just keep shooting each other until one side just gave up and left the field. And that's the way, usually that's what would happen. Glory, the first Antietam scene was by far, I think, the most accurate depiction of a Civil War battle scene.
Yeah.
In any Civil War movie. The scene of the 20th Maine in the Gettysburg movie, I think, is definitely very good. I wish Hollywood would make more movies about the Civil War, but I wish they would kind of treat them more like the battles were more like what they were back then, which wasn't like this, this Lord of the Rings type fighting scene where they're all kind of like hand-to-hand fighting and, stuff that really didn't happen very often.
Well, those battle scenes are on a whole different level in Glory.
Yeah.
Even now, when I go back and watch it, even though you've seen so many more war movies since then, like there's still cringy, fight scenes in Glory where you're like, wow, I mean, like anybody can get shot at any moment kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Not every movie has that. Every movie has its like main cast of characters that aren't going to get hit or whatnot, but like there's an intensity on another level with Glory, and so I appreciate the filmmakers work on that.
Part of what I do as an artist too is to try to kind of correct that too, is to show, okay, Civil War battles weren't really like that, like with the 154th New York painting here, what I'm trying to show in this scene is just a line of battle as it would have looked during that battle.
Yeah.
Based on the historical record, so so that's what I strive to do. Is sometimes you have, sometimes what I try to do is correct the record. Sometimes, but.
And well, I think that's a good segue to dive into the work behind you. This is your most latest work, and again, that's depicted in 154th New York at the Brickyard, Gettysburg. That's when Coster's tiny 11th Corps Brigade is marching for Gettysburg to try to stem the tide of that Ewell's Corps just driving through town.
Yeah.
And, the 154th, I think, was also one of the smallest regiments in the 11th Corps, like maybe just slightly over 200 guys, and however many made it out of there. But could you share, your inspiration behind this project, how you thought of it, how it began? I'm personally a huge I'm an Army of the Potomac fan as a whole, but I particularly just have always been drawn to the 11th Corps. And, the 154th, I think, was also one of the smallest regiments in the 11th Corps, like maybe just slightly over 200 guys, and however many made it out of there. But could you share, your inspiration behind this project, how you thought of it, how it began? I'm personally a huge I'm an Army of the Potomac fan as a whole, but I particularly just have always been drawn to the 11th Corps. And They've always fascinated me, and one little bit about that is in the movie Gods and Generals, like you only see the Love Corps briefly, and they're running away scared from Jax's men. But I was like, well, who are these guys? It just made me want to read more into it, and then I find out that yeah, they've been ridiculed for years, and honestly, just within the last 15 years or 20 years, have they been really getting a little more respect and attention with some newer books out and things
Yeah.
about them. And so I appreciate that. And so I appreciate you spending time to work on a project with them. So please tell us a little bit behind the scenes for this one.
Well, this painting, believe it or not, began 3 years ago, a little more than 3 years ago. And part of what I try to do is when I'm a big Gettysburg fan, big Gettysburg, I love reading about the Battle of Gettysburg. There's so much that happened during that battle and every single other battle during the Civil War. That's just so interesting. But there's so much that happened just during the Battle of Gettysburg that happened just during the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg that I could literally spend the rest of my life painting just the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg and not get to everything.
Yeah.
So one of the things I try to do is I try to pick stories and regiments that aren't really as well known, that people. I mean, I've done famous regiments too. I've done the Iron Brigade. I've done the 20th Maine, Gettysburg. But I try to pick. Lately, I've been trying to pick regiments and actions that people don't really know as much about. And part of the reason for that is, I read their stories and I feel like, all right, their story needs to be told. People seem to forget that the people that fought during this war, they sacrificed a lot. Some of them were never heard from again, and these people had families. These people had, people that were waiting for them back home, and their story deserves to be told.
Mm-hmm.
So I was aware of Mark Dunkelman, who's the artist who created the mural at Gettysburg. He worked with another artist, and his name is I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now, but I was familiar with Mark Dunkelman's mural at Gettysburg, and I was always impressed by it. And I always thought to myself, one of these days, when I get to it, I'd like to do a painting on the 154th New York and the Brickyard action, from my own perspective and from what I've been able to glean from studying it, because I feel like it's an important action that happened on the first day that I believe really does need to be treated with a visual painting. So I started researching it, and I contacted Mark, and he was very, very gracious with helping me with research on the painting. He was very, very helpful with answering questions. He helped me with I don't know if you could see the brick kiln here. He
Yeah.
helped me with research on the correct type of brick kiln that they would have had, that would have been in this area at Gettysburg. It's the way this area was laid out. This is what you're looking at here. See these houses back here. These are the three houses that were in this area. There's another house uh, behind them that you can't see in this painting because it was there during the battle, but at this angle you would not have been able to see it. And right along here, right behind where these buildings are, is where I believe it's North Stratton Street right now. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
is right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this whole area, this is the Coons Brickyard. Let's see if we can, yeah. So this is the Coons Brickyard here. This area is still kind of a little bit of a mystery. We don't know exactly how it was laid out, but we kind of can, uh, gain some idea from maps,
Sure.
from period maps. But what we do know is that there was a road leading through this area here behind this house. This is the road that these houses were on. These four houses, including the one that's behind them that you can't see, were the only houses in this area at the time. And this is right here is a little carriage lane that kind of goes into the area, into this yard. And then from the road there was a carriage gate, and then there was a fence that you could see here. That I'm trying to do this. This
Sure.
fence that they're all lined up against. This is the fence that they were lined up on
Yeah.
battle, and then right beyond the fence, and you see this in Mark Dunkelman's mural too, is that there's a wheat field, and then you have Hayes's Louisiana, I think this is Hayes's Louisiana Brigade and Isaac. I think it was Isaac Avery.
Yes.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I sometimes don't remember exactly who's who. Sometimes, but I'm talking off the cuff. So if I got that wrong, I apologize. But there was a wheat field in this area and a slight rise. When you go there now, it's all houses here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but this is what I was kind of imagining what it must have been like when I started to read more about the battle. One of the things I wanted to try to impart in this painting is to show what it must have been like to see these lines of Confederate troops coming down on them, because you see the defensive line of the 154th New York, and what's going on here with these guys. They're kind of out of position of where they would be on a battle line. They're kind of moving back. But the reason why they're moving back is because to their right is another whole brigade coming in and flanking them. So these guys in the foreground are starting to move back because they're seeing what's going on the right. And this is the colonel of the regiment. I'm blanking on his name right now, but this is the colonel of the regiment. He's pointing to the line coming in and the fact that they're about to be flanked. So that's kind of what I'm trying to show here is the fact that they're putting up a defense. It's kind of a last line of defense, but they're starting to become overwhelmed. So then now they have to make a decision to kind of move back. So
I think that commander was Daniel Allen.
Daniel Allen, that's right.
Yeah.
Again, I apologize.
No, you're no. One thing of note, then, I really love that detail. Then of like, okay, so there, the way it is with you can't when you're trying to recreate a battle scene in an image like this, you can't put everything in. It's just too hard to cram. So you have to choose what angle you want to pick, and I'm sure that plays a part. But I like the idea of, we have that mystery. Like, we don't see what's going on, but we have the reaction of those soldiers in the foreground to see that, oh, their right flank is folding up here. Like, they're starting to pull back because there's this Confederate onslaught that's just ginormous. And I know, again, this particular regiment, a few 200 or so guys, and Coster only had 3 regiments going forward, I think, right here. And it's like against 2 brigades or so of Ewell's Corps. And so I know it was a short-lived action too. Like, I'm not sure what the runtime was, but like it was very quick.
They were only there for 10 to 12 minutes at the most.
Yeah,
they fired like maybe, I forget what it was. It was like 8 to 12, maybe 12 volleys, and that was it. And then they had to.
And most of them got captured. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
One of the other things too is with this particular painting and with some of my newer paintings is I'm trying to work on a canvas that's a little bit longer, that's more wider, so you can see more of the action. Because one of the things I want to really try to do with some of these newer paintings is to really show how big these battles were. So when you come up to the painting, you can see this is the 27th Pennsylvania back here. You can see their flag in the background, and they're starting to move back too because they're being flanked on that end. But one of the reasons why I chose a long panoramic canvas like this is to show as much of the action as I possibly could. And going forward with some future paintings that we'll probably talk about later, this is probably the format I'm going to choose to show.
I like it.
Yeah, to show. I kind of like it too.
Yeah.
A lot of my paintings are more like a 30 by 40. They're a little bit more rectangular.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of like showing the more wider format. I think it really gives people a better idea of what these battles really were like.
It does, and how big these regiments were, and I like the idea of almost like a never-ending line of troops. Like there's so much action going on, you can't even see the end of it. Like it's happening like this on a grand scale over Gettysburg at this point.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge too. Is when you're depicting a battle like this, one of the things you have to kind of keep in mind is what's going on in the background. What regiments would you see back there? What would you see going on? Are they engaged in a fight? Would you see a cavalry regiment back there? Are they being flanked? Would you see Confederates coming through, breaking through the line? Like, there's so much to kind of think about when you're doing a painting like this.
Yeah, and again, that's another reason why I appreciate this project because, like you alluded to, when anyone who visits Coster Avenue right now,
Yeah,
it's very small area, and I wonder too if that stretch of land right there is that pretty much the carriage lane, what we have
I,
remaining there,
I guess. I mean, they
more or less.
assume that they put the monument pretty much where the fence was, if I remember.
Okay, okay,
I think there is a photo that exists of the fence, of the original fence. It's a really old photo, I think from the 1870s or 80s, from when the veterans, it might have been from the 1880s.
okay,
There
okay.
was one photo that I did see that they think might have been the actual original fence, but by that time it was starting to become built up at that point, and it was still kind of open, but it was still kind of. And now you can see in the background, you can
Yeah.
see, there's houses starting to be built in that area.
Well, that's one. I think we history buffs and visitors, these battlefields got to be careful because
Mhm.
now you go to Coster Avenue and whatnot, and it's so built up, and the houses are right there, but those houses weren't there. Some of those ones in the background may still be standing, like remnants
Yeah,
of it, but the ones like so that wheat field, that field where the brigades are charging across, those are all houses now,
yeah, it's just a
and
street.
so it's so easy for us though. Like you can go to Little Round Top, or you can go to the Peach Orchard, and you still have these like vast, clear views, if you will, like of what it would have looked like. But the temptation, though, is like if someone goes to Costa Avenue, they just think, "Oh, okay, well they were fighting behind these buildings right here, or they were fighting." It's just easy, like we forget what it would have looked like at the time, and so that's why when you put this work in of making this image here, it's helping us understand, like, okay, all right, there's more than meets the eye here. Like we have to think outside the box here, and you have to really go back and study that. Okay, this this layout was totally different during the battle,
Yeah.
and it was a whole different landscape at the time.
Yeah, so just going back to your original question about how my process basically for the process for this, it's pretty much the same for every painting. So like just going back to what I was talking about with Mark Dunkelman and his mural, that's kind of what inspired me to do a painting on the 11th New York, and I'm sorry, on the 11th Corps and the 154th New York at the Brickyard. Um, so I started reading more about the battle, and then I saw there was some really good YouTube tours of that area and talking about what happened there. And I thought, okay, this is definitely something I want to paint. So what I'll do is after this interview, I'll send you a photo of the sketch that I created.
Oh
The
wow!
sketch I have here. I'll show you real quick. This is the color sketch for this painting that I worked on. So what I
Oh,
do
that's
is,
cool.
so when I get an idea for a painting, what I'll do is I'll do a black and white sketch, and then once I'm happy with the composition and the layout of the painting, what I'll do is I'll actually do an actual color rendering, just very quickly. It's, as you can see, it's not very detailed. There's not a lot of tiny detail. This is just to get the feeling of the scene. And
Yeah,
I'm actually going to
still
be
looks great though.
thanks, and I'm actually going to be giving this to Mark Dunkelman as a gift
Oh
because he helped
wow!
me a lot with the research, and he also wrote the historical narrative for the certificates that are going to be part of the prints for this painting. So I'm going to be giving this to him as a gift. So he's going to own an original piece of artwork that's part of this project, and I'm also giving him a print as a thank you.
Nice, nice.
So yeah, he was really really awesome with helping me out with that. But so what I'll do is I'll do a color sketch like this. This is done in gouache, just on regular Bristol paper. And what this does is it kind of helps me to understand. Okay, this is the lighting and uh, the color theme that I want to use for the painting. So, and then I go ahead and work on the actual artwork.
I have to ask you there because that has me curious now. How many variations of that do you typically have to go through? Like, how many renderings of sketches do you like? Is it usually first try and you got it, or is
Usually,
it a number of them till you find the right position and the right image that you want?
well, usually here actually I have something. Hang on 1 second. Usually it starts. This is my one of my sketchbooks. Usually starts out as a doodle, kind of like this. This is an idea that I had to probably do something on the battle at Seminary Ridge on the first day of the battle when the artillery line was lined
Mm.
up near the seminary. But it starts out as basically a bunch of scribbles like this with a bunch of notes. And if I like the idea, I'll keep developing it, and then these notes kind of help me to look into things to research. And then what I'll do then is I'll take that drawing and scan it into the computer, and then what I'll do is I'll bring it up in Adobe Photoshop, and I'll
Okay.
actually draw it out in Adobe Photoshop. Now, the reason why I do that is because with Photoshop, you can take something, kind of clip it out and move it around, and kind of reduce and enlarge things just to see, okay, does this work better like this? Does this cavalryman work better over here? If I took him and enlarged him a little bit, does he look a little bit better? That's what working in
Yeah.
Adobe Photoshop kind of allows me to do, is to kind of make changes. And then what I could do is I can actually color it in a way that I think that I'm thinking about having the final piece look like, and it gives me very quickly an idea of what I'm thinking about. It helps me to flesh out the idea a little bit more. So it's kind of like, some people think of it as, oh, you're cheating, you're using a computer, but no, really, it's a tool. It's a
Yes.
lot of, believe it or not, a lot of artists, even back 100 years ago, would have used tools to help them do things quicker and faster. Even a few hundred years ago, they were using all kinds of things to help them out. They were using grids and Vermeer. Apparently, he was using a certain type of lens to try to, copy what he was seeing to paint. So artists have done that for centuries. So it's not anything really different. It's just
Sure.
it's just trying to use an efficient way to try to, okay, how can I make this better? So
Mm.
so
Yeah.
with this particular piece, I did the same thing. I did a black and white line drawing. I didn't do it in color on there. I did the hand color drawing. Sometimes I'll do a hand color drawing, or sometimes I'll just do it on the computer. It just kind of depends on how I'm feeling. And then once it's
Yeah.
satisfied with how uh, with where I'm at, then I'll go ahead and start working on an actual canvas. And those steps kind of help you to kind of build the building, kind of thing. This is the foundation of the building that you're going to
Mm.
eventually build. So those that's what all those steps are.
Do you use models in your work? Do you use like living historians or anything like the pose, or do you not do that for your
I
work?
used to do that a lot more in the beginning, but I haven't. I kind of stopped doing that, and here's the reason why. Models are great, and models solve a lot of problems, but one of the things that I've kind of realized is that when you take a digital photo, when you use a modern digital camera to take a picture of a model, a lot of times subconsciously, as an artist, sometimes it seems like that some of the distortions that are captured in the digital photo are then somehow translated to the painting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I'm seeing, in some modern depictions of historical battles, is it looks a little cookie cutter to me. And it looks like somebody cut out something from a digital photo and just kind of pasted it on there. I try to avoid that. I try to use more, more not traditional methods, because a lot of models and a lot of artists back then used models too. But what I try to do is I try to draw out the figure in my head first. So basically, every single figure that you're seeing here, I did not pose one model for this. These are all completely out of my head.
Wow.
And yes, sometimes I will look at a photo, like if I'm not sure of how like the fold of somebody's arm, would look like. Sometimes I will look at a reenactor photo online. I'll just take a quick look at it, but I'm not depending on that. And the reason why is because I want my paintings to look more like the old master paintings kind of did,
Yeah.
kind of like the
Yeah.
Frederick Remingtons, the um, Tom Lovell, the artist that I mentioned previously. He used models, but he didn't depend on models. And there's a lot of paintings that he did that apparently he didn't use models for. A lot of drawings of figures that he did not use models for, and they all look great. If you understand if you're an artist and you understand, and this takes years and years of study and practice. This is not something You could totally just pick it
Yes.
up. Comes from years of life drawing, years of studying the figure, studying how drapery falls on the figure, and just also being a reenactor and sketching reenactments and things like that. Uh, it comes from that kind of experience, Uh,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have to ask, especially, some of your images here, it's a full scale regiment, if you will, but we're really seeing headlong, one or two companies at most here, up close. And so when you are, making the depictions of these men, as far as when you're recreating a real regiment and a real colonel or officers, if you will, are you studying some of the original photographs
oh
of some
yeah,
of those commanders? And then when it comes to the individual men, of course, we don't have many, many pictures, but we have, unknowns and various images of soldiers in that regiment. Are you looking at those too? And are you looking at the original rosters of these companies and regiments to, as far as, you can see some paintings out there that have like old men next to boys and it may not always be accurate, right? But like if you're looking at in your research, if you see, oh, wow, the average man in this company, in this regiment was 22, 24, like, do you take that into account? Do you try to, I'm interested in that process
yeah.
too.
I have a whole database of that I've collected for years since the late since literally like the late '90s, since the start of the internet, or mid to late '90s. I have a whole database on my computer of all different North and South Civil War regiments. So any particular regiment that I want to research, I probably have a photo of somebody from that regiment in there. Confederates can be a little bit more tricky because their uniforms were so varied from the beginning of the war to the end that sometimes you don't know if really you have the photo of the right guy or not. And then you have you have a lot of regiments in the beginning of the Civil War that dressed in gray uniforms, and a lot of Confederate regiments that dressed in blue uniforms. You could kind of sometimes tell, but unless you have an identification, sometimes you really can't. But yeah, I do rely on photos of people. The sergeant right here, that's Amos Humiston right there.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
and yeah, I used a photo of Colonel Allen to depict him. Again, I'm sorry I blanked out on his name before. I just couldn't. Sometimes I just can't. Sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So, um, the other interesting thing about this particular painting too is that the flags of the 154th New York, they don't exist anymore. So
Oh,
unfortunately, what I had not unfortunately, unfortunately, what I had to do is try to just depict the flags based on known examples of New York battle flags. So we know that they had a regimental color and that they had a national color. We just don't know exactly what the patterns were that they used. So what I tried to do here was to show just a basic generic national color with an eagle finial and white stars, which is basically apropos to many New York State regiments. And the regimental colors are basically like a standard federal regimental flag that a lot of units had during the Civil War. Wherever I could, I tried to like say this flag up here. I believe this is the flag of the 6th North Carolina. You can see it a little bit closer on the photo than you can here, but they had a little bit of a stripe that one of the stripes went right through the middle of the flag, so I made sure to put that in. So wherever I could, where I could find out information about
yeah.
certain details, I try to put it in the painting
That's
as much as
great.
possible. Especially even the way that the soldiers are wearing their 11th Corps badges, they wore them in a certain way with the points pretty much sticking up.
Yeah.
Um, and
Wow.
my understanding is a lot of these men were probably wearing sack coats at this time. There's some photos of the 154th New York men, a couple of them wearing frock coats and
Hmm.
state jackets, but that's pretty much any New York regiment. They're on campaign. They're probably using.
Yes.
And
And it was really hot.
it was really hot. Yeah, I mean, we do know that there's other regiments that had frock coats at Gettysburg.
Sure.
Uh, just as an aside, I don't know if you know about the famous Harvest of Death photo, right?
Hmm.
The photo
Yeah.
that's been a mystery for years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to recommend a really amazing series of videos to watch on that. It's called The Harvest of Death, and it's made by a guy named Timothy Dolan. It's on YouTube. You could watch it. Unfortunately, YouTube age restricted it because of the.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
now convinced that the location of that where that photograph was taken, has been found, and it
Okay.
was, and I believe from what I've been able to research on my own, and from what that series, it's a 3-part series, but it's presented excellently, and
Nice.
the way the evidence that the way he presents the evidence of why he thinks that area it has been found, which is basically right right near where General Rounds was killed. I'm now 100% convinced that that area has been found. I believe those are men of the 2nd Wisconsin and possibly 1 or 2 men from the 151st Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
And you can see that they're wearing. You can see that one of the men is wearing. He's wearing a frock coat, but he also has a little bit of a. He's got the attachment on his shoulder for a shoulder scale. 151st Pennsylvania is known to have had that.
Really?
Yeah. So
wow.
So what I think must have happened. I know this is getting onto a big tangent here, but I'm a huge fan of Civil War photography and work photography.
You have to be.
I've always been fascinated by those photos, and like everybody else, I've been trying to find the location of them. And I'm not saying that I found the location. I'm just saying that I'm convinced that it has been found. And the reason why I think that is because the uniforms match up to the regiments that would have been there. The terrain matches up and I know of the argument that you have to match up the angles from both angles. I believe that both angles match up. But not only that, what really convinced me is when you look at that photo and you zoom in the background, there's a barricade back there, and you could very, very faintly see a line of graves. And that area where that line of graves is exactly where I believe it was Scales's brigade came through and attacked Seminary Ridge later in that afternoon, and they took heavy casualties in that area. Now, if you go back and look at the Warren, I think it's not the Warren map, it's the Elliott burial map.
Yes, yeah.
If you look at that map and you look at that area, okay, you'll see right in the background in the photographs, there's a barricade right where it shows on the map. There's a road right where it shows in the photograph. It all lines up, and there's a line of graves right where it's shown in the background of the photograph. So to me, and plus there's a line of trees right where it's shown in the photograph. Okay.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't know of any other place on the Gettysburg battlefield where these things line up.
Yeah.
And if you watch that series of videos, I highly recommend watching it.
Wow.
If you're interested in Gettysburg, you're interested in photographs, take a look at that series of videos. I highly recommend it. And I'm now convinced that those are members of the 2nd Wisconsin. So apparently what happened was, the way he presents it is, when the Iron Brigade was coming up and going into the woods, they received, and there's a little bit of a ridge there. There's a little bit of a swell there. When they came on that swale, that's when they received that volley from McPherson's woods. And that's where I believe a lot of those soldiers, a lot of the dead bodies received their fatal wounds.
Yeah.
But in that same area, I believe the 151st Pennsylvania was also fighting back and forth there. So what I think had happened is probably later on in the day, there was probably a few more casualties that kind of piled up in that area. So you have a mix of a couple of guys from the 151st PA, the school teachers regiment, and Wisconsin. And I'm also, the other thing I noticed too, there's a few really interesting things in the photograph. If you really zoom in, you could download the high-res images on the Library of Congress website.
That's right.
There's a hat laying on the ground. The hat, I believe, has a First Corps badge on it. Okay, it's okay. It kind of looks a little different in different versions of the photograph, but I'm convinced that it's a blue disc. and I believe it was the 151st PA that had those blue discs. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that you see in that photograph, in one of the photographs, is laying on the ground next to one of the feet of the soldiers is a canvas camp shoe. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's they called them sporting shoes back then. Okay,
Yeah.
basically it was a canvas shoe that had a leather reinforced toe and a leather reinforced back, and it had where you tied the.
I have a pair of those.
So those shoes were very popular in the Army of the Potomac, and a lot of soldiers had them. There's two photographs that we know of today of members of the 14th Brooklyn wearing that exact type of shoe. Okay, now if you study what happened in that action, supposedly what happened was the 2nd Wisconsin came up. They received their volley from the woods, from I believe it was Archer's brigade. The 14th Brooklyn comes up to their right. They start to go over the swale, and they start taking fire from McPherson's Wood too, just before they come down the hill into the McPherson barn area. And then their monument is a little farther. I've always been a little bit confused about why the 14th Brooklyn's monument was so far forward, because in a lot of the times I've read about the battle, supposedly, like, why would the Confederates be behind them in the woods, and why would they be so far forward? So apparently, I guess what happened was, and I didn't realize this until I saw these videos, was apparently the 14th Brooklyn came up almost. They kind of went in an echelon to the right of the 2nd Wisconsin. The 2nd Wisconsin takes their volley. They get a volley too from these guys. So, what I'm thinking is a few of these guys from the 14th Brooklyn must have gotten wounded when they, and if they were wearing that shoe, and a Confederate comes and picks up the shoe and walks around and then tosses it next to the, I mean, who knows? You don't know, because these don't have any shoes on. But why is there a canvas camp shoe that we know that the 14th Brooklyn had laying in that same area right next to all these dead guys? So when you take that all into consideration, I don't know. I'm convinced that you know.
Hey, I'll take your word for it, because you have to have a knowledge of all the units and regiments and these things. And sometimes experts, like, they forget some of those little details when people are trying to look at this. And so you really do have to look at the units that were around that area. Yeah. And like you said, you find out what they were wearing, and all that plays a key part in the detective work there.
And to me,
I'm going to have to look at that.
Yeah, it's, if you download, you have to kind of work with it's a little hard to see, but you could see it. There's a shoe laying right next to the foot of one of the dead soldiers in the Harvest of Death. And if you look at it, and you look at a canvas it's the exact type of style shoe.
Wow.
Now, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure if the members of the Iron Brigade had them. It's possible they probably could have. I mean, if they were all part of the same brigade, the same sutler, they probably would have. But we know for sure there's two photographs of members of the 14th Brooklyn wearing that shoe. One of them was at Gettysburg that we know of, and he was wounded there. So we don't know if that's his shoe, but
hey,
it's just fact. It's just stuff
it is.
I find fascinating. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into.
No. I think listeners are going to appreciate this, because this show is about regiments, and everyone has theories on that picture, and I think this is a well-found one. That's
to me,
good.
That shoe is the dog not barking.
So, there you go. Yeah. I can't wait to see the breaking news come out eventually.
Yeah, I mean,
prove you're right.
Yeah, a lot of people are starting to understand. There's a lot of people that are starting to understand. I mean, there's been YouTube videos talking about that series of photographs, and thinking that they've pretty much found. It just hasn't been accepted by everybody yet.
Nice. But hey, one thing I would like to do, and I wanted to showcase, or I wanted to share some of my favorite pieces that you've done that I are my favorites. But I'm going to throw out a couple of names for you, and then maybe just tell me a little bit of that project and what it was like for you, the experience. So I have a bunch, but I'm going to narrow down to maybe two here. And one that I really like, going back to what you said earlier, honestly, with the amount of regiments at Gettysburg, you could spend your whole career
Mhm.
doing nothing but Gettysburg regimental paintings because you never run out of content. But you are so right as far as I'm a big first day buff of the Battle of Gettysburg too, which it just seems like so much happened, so many casualties in a short amount of time. Like it was just ferocious that first day. But um, this is honestly the first painting I ever saw of yours, and I still like it to this day. It's the let me see. The title was "A Desperate Stand," and it's the 147th New York
Yeah.
on the first day. And some of their accounts that they wrote are some of my favorite accounts to read.
Yeah.
But that's one of my favorites. And you feel you as a viewer, you're scrunched down in the wheat with them,
Mhm.
on that first day. And I think it was Davis's Mississippi Brigade coming up on them. And one thing I always remember from them is one of the guys wrote when they were retreating finally. Um, the Mississippi guys had camp hatchets
Yeah.
throwing behind them, and that's pretty compelling stuff. But do you have any notes about that project?
That painting, believe it or not, was inspired by a book called Cutler's Brigade at Gettysburg
Okay,
by
yeah,
Jim. I think it was Jim McLean who wrote that. They actually just recreate. They actually just republished that book as an
yes,
updated
yeah,
version of it, and the author used that painting in the book, which I really am honored that he chose to.
yeah,
But that painting was inspired by that book, and again the first corps. I'm a big first corps guy. I'm really interested about how, especially Cutler's Brigade, because they were like the first brigade on the field, and they were interesting because they had the 147th New York who was in that fight, but they also had my favorite regiment, which is the 14th Brooklyn. The 14th Brooklyn is my favorite regiment, just because I mean you could do a whole 5-part miniseries on just the 14th Brooklyn, but anyway. Um, but yeah, the story of that fight really, I read it and I'm like, this has to be painted. This is just amazing. So what was interesting about that was, what I realized when I was painting it was that the area where the 147th New York's monument is today is not where that fight happened. They
okay,
have the monument further back, more towards where the road is that crosses the railroad cut. It's on that road, but the actual area where that fight took place is about 100 yards ahead of that, or west of that, on the same ridge that kind of lines up with that lines up. I think it's the one that lines up with the barn, or just right about there.
yeah,
So that's one of the things that was kind of interesting when I was researching that. I was like, oh, this is not where they fought. They fought like literally like out in the middle of nowhere out here. And when you research that, you start to realize, okay, yeah, now I understand how this kind of went down, because they're they're stuck on their left side. They have nowhere to go except into the railroad cut, and you have Davis's Mississippians are coming not only to their front, but they're flanking them on the right. And they were slightly ahead of, if I remember correctly, they were just slightly ahead of the 56 Pennsylvania and the 70. I think it was the 76 New York and the 56 Pennsylvania. The 56 Pennsylvania was the rightmost regiment, as I recall. They supposedly have the claim the credit of being the first regiment to fire an actual volley at the battle.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
that's been disputed, or who knows what's really true about that. But what the 147th New York didn't realize was that those two regiments, because they were being flanked, they pulled back, and they didn't know that until they started receiving fire from their right, and that's when they refused their line. So this battle, this scene had all the elements of an exciting battle that needed to be painted. And to be honest with you, it's I'm surprised nobody has done it before. Before I did, because I don't know, it just seemed like a really
yeah,
interesting battle, and what happened to these guys. Uh, Cutler's Brigade, a couple of regiments in Cutler's Brigade, the 147th New York, and I think the 14th Brooklyn, are one of like 2 or 3 regiments in the entire Army of the Potomac that can claim the credit of having fought all 3 days of the battle. They were actually in action, I believe, all 3 days of the battle. And I can't remember the numbers right now offhand, but by the end of the battle, the 147th New York was just down to like a few men.
Yeah,
They
it was ridiculous.
they hadn't eaten in 3 days too. So imagine you're in this big huge battle, and you threw away your haversack to try to get away from these Confederates that are flanking you, and you don't get you don't get resupplied until 3 days later. I think it's my understanding.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, uh,
No, it's remarkable, and again, like it just goes to show you again that like to me, every regiment, especially every regiment fought at Gettysburg in this case, has a story worth telling and experience something. All these guys, some of them aren't blessed with famous regimental histories, or some of them didn't have many guys writing diaries, or some are more known than others, but there's so many, even to this day, stories that haven't been documented or recreated in a way to kind of remember it. And so
yeah.
that's another one that is a good highlight. And for another perspective, on the whole other in the whole Western theater here, and I know a lot of your work is geared for Gettysburg, but you've done a lot of Red War paintings, but also when it comes to Civil War, you've done a few in different theaters, and one is a depiction of the Battle of Franklin, and it's called Almost Home, and it's showing Todd Carter in the 20th Tennessee and Bates Brigade before the assault at Franklin. And I saw that one way back when I was doing a piece. I was writing on the 20th Tennessee, and when I was researching, I came across that image, and what struck me too is the color in that image, like the sunlight. Like it's a very, I like how you have a lot of action shots, right? But this is a moment right before they charge and make the assault.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I like that idea of like, here they are in formation, and Todd's telling them I'm almost home. But do you have any notes on that project?
Well, actually, that's actually one of my favorite paintings that I've done, just because of the way the lighting came out in that piece. As far as notes are concerned, I mean, what I was trying to do with that piece is like you said, just try to make it be a moment before the chaos type of thing, this calm moment before these guys go into a battle and basically get chewed up. I mean, we kind of all understand the story. I just thought it was a very ironic story where the guy, he fights in the Confederate Army of Tennessee for 3 years, and then he ends up in this place exactly where his home is. And I don't know if people know the story of what happened to Todd Carter, but so I believe he was I forget what it was. He was either commander, or he was in the 20th Tennessee prior to this, and then he became an adjutant in the Confederate Army of Tennessee. He was from Franklin, Tennessee. He grew up there. The area where his old regiment was going to charge towards was toward where he grew up, his home. His mother and father, his sisters were in, like, literally they were about to charge right towards his home, literally towards his front doorstep. So that story really captured me, and I thought, well, this really deserves a piece. And people who know the story, he was mortally wounded, and his family went out. I believe it was the next morning after the armies had moved on. They went out and found Todd, and they brought him home, and he actually died in his parlor, surrounded by his family. And like, where do you ever hear about a Civil War soldier ever having that luxury? It's not a luxury, obviously, but it's you're there with your family, and you're sharing your last moments with your family in this great,
a good death, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And so for that particular moment, it was just one of those things where I thought it would be more poignant rather than show them in a big battle scene or whatever, just to say, this is a moment where I'm telling my boys I'm going home. I'm going to be with my family. And a lot of people like the painting. And it is one of my favorites, just because of I'm really happy with the way the lighting came out on that one.
That is, it really turned out good.
Thank you.
As we start winding down, one question I have for you is, on the same note of what we've been talking about, but like, what do you hope to accomplish, with all the many works that you're doing, and what do you want viewers of your art to take away, when seeing your work? What's your main goal?
Well, my main goal is to, with every painting that I have done and I continue to do, is to show people what the Civil War was like, uh, from when was, you can't get exactly what it was really like, but to try to show people as close as possible to what the Civil War must have looked like as possible. And with that meaning, there's some artists who make the Civil War look like a Thomas Kincaid painting, and I'm not going to name names, but it's just, to me,
Yeah.
that's not really giving these people who lived through this era, who sacrificed their lives. And I know there's a whole big argument about who was right, who was wrong, whatever. To me, it's not about that. It's about just portraying the history, showing. I want somebody who's a kid who's living, 50 years from now, or 100 years after I'm gone, to look at one of my paintings and say, okay, that's what the Brickyard fight at Gettysburg must have looked like, and to show it in a way that's true to what the history says happened. Because really, when you think about it, these guys, when you think about what they went through, they really deserve to be depicted in a way that honors their memory. And that's what I try to do, and I try to do it in a way that I really am in awe of these people, and that's what I try to impart in the work. So yeah, so that's what I do. That's what I'm all about, and that's what I try to do. So
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And thank you again for your work. And that's why we appreciate that. And like, even there's so many out there like me myself, like there, I don't have any pictures of my ancestors, and there's a lot out there north and south that there's just not much content, or there's not much writings of your ancestors unit. So again, sometimes all we have is a painting.
yeah,
The kind of, and so like for someone even now, a descendant of somebody that served in the 154th New York, they can have this to look at, and it gives them an idea of like, wow, this is what great grandfather, what his experience may have looked like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so it gives us those little windows into these moments. And again, I'm a huge Gettysburg buff, so when I see these, I appreciate having that visual, because it is not everyone has. I feel like I have a good imagination, but in this day and age, not everybody is gifted with the patience to just, for me, I could just go to a battlefield and just sit for a few minutes and try to take it all in.
hmm
But some people do need that kind of visual help, whether it's a documentary or a book or a painting such as this, where, not that you don't have to bring the painting with you on the battlefield, but you do have that as a visual to kind of look and see like, okay, yeah, let me go to Coster Avenue and then try to envision this. Let me go to different aspects, Blockers Knoll, or different things where you try to envision, and so the painting, your work helps us visualize that, and so that's what we as the viewers appreciate for your work, and the work of many others who are trying, even now, to keep recreating this.
yeah. I
But
mean, thankfully we have phones now, so we could kind of like bring up a picture of a painting, and
well, exactly,
we could look
yeah.
on a battlefield nowadays. Where we're back, 20 years ago, we weren't really able to do that, which
Amen.
is some, it definitely brings a new way of looking at it, to
Exactly.
the take.
Exactly.
Um, so
Well, I do have to ask you to, and you don't have to share. You share whatever you're willing to share, but like, if you could tease even future projects, future ideas, and or what theaters you might be working on next.
well, believe it or not, one of the things I want to do is actually go back to some paintings that I did when I was first beginning to paint Civil War and kind of redo them a little bit. There's a couple paintings that I really would love to redo. The painting that I did of the first Civil War painting I did, which is called Heart of Texas, which shows the first Texas in the Antietam cornfield. I did that painting when I was in college, in 1995, and everybody loves it. Everybody always compliments me about how good it is, and I'm like, I look at it now and I'm like, all right, well, I could see why people like it, but I'm like, it's not really what I would like to do now. And plus, the subject of the first Texas is so interesting too. Uh, what I'm hoping to do is to redo another version of that piece, a more updated version of that piece. And also another painting that a lot of people have commented me on was the painting Now Is the Pinch, which was kind of an interesting episode that happened during the Battle of Antietam, where this actually happened just before the First Texas. For what happened with the First Texas was the Iron Brigade went into the cornfield. They came out of the southern portion of the cornfield. They engaged with the Confederates, and then right behind them, Phelps's brigade, which contained the 14th Brooklyn, came up, and they actually came in and filled the holes of the Iron Brigade with the 6th Wisconsin. So you had the 6th Wisconsin and the 14th Brooklyn fighting together just south of the cornfield. And again, just going back to studying and Civil War photography, if you're familiar with that photo, everybody's familiar with that photograph of the Hagerstown Pike with all the dead soldiers next to it. Now, from my understanding, the 14th Brooklyn and the 6th Wisconsin, they wheeled to the right and they engaged with Stark's brigade. But there was another, I think it was the 19th Indiana or the 7th Indiana, I forget which one, came in from behind them and caught these guys in a crossfire that caused a lot of those casualties. So sometimes I like to think, the 14th Brooklyn was probably involved in probably creating a bunch of those casualties. Not that you want to make light of people's death.
Yeah.
It's kind of fascinating to think about it. So anyway, one of the paintings I wanted to try to redo is maybe try to redo that whole scene of the 14th Brooklyn coming up and reinforcing the 6th Wisconsin. And then the other thing I have going on too is I'm doing a bunch of regimental Civil War uniform studies. They're just actually I have a few here.
Or kind of like the 8th Missouri one you did.
Yeah.
Individuals like that. Oh yeah.
So these are just acrylic paintings. This is Elmer Ellsworth of the
Oh wow. Yeah.
Fire Zouaves. Now a lot of people don't know Elmer Ellsworth cut his hair before he was killed.
Yeah.
Before he left New York City with the Fire Zouaves, they all shaved their heads.
Yes.
And a lot of people see photographs of Elmer Ellsworth with the long hair, but he did not. Apparently, he did not have those during the time he was killed. So I'm basically doing a bunch of regimental studies. Let me see if I can grab another one here real quick. Hang on a second.
I think I remember hearing when I read the account about the haircuts there. Like I think one guy did an eagle shape in his hair or something like that.
So,
oh wow, nice.
This is the New York Hawkins Zouaves.
Yes.
So I'm doing a bunch of regimental uniform studies. I'm really also big into Zouave regiments because I just find them really fascinating, and the uniforms are just so fun to paint and study. And my eventual goal is to put these into a book with my artwork. But I want to do a bunch of regimental uniform studies to kind of put that all together. So there was a bunch that I did a few years ago, like more than like 10 years ago, but I kind of want to do some more updated versions of them now. So that's kind of what I got going on now. And I also have, if anybody's interested, I have a YouTube channel called A Brush with History where I show myself working on these paintings.
Yes.
They're basically just time lapses because I usually paint for like an 8-hour stint. So it would be impossible to show me working in one video unless it's like a 50-hour video.
A time lapse.
So like time lapse and just showing me on the painting. So if anybody's interested in checking out my YouTube channel, A Brush with History, you could check that out and see me. I try to post as I get paintings done.
Yeah. We know that's a good segue too. Before we close, where can we listeners and viewers of this episode, where can we find your art? Where can we purchase your art? And where can we see your art? How can we follow you online too?
Thank you. So I have a website, which is maritato.com. That's where I have basically my main, it's an online store. It's fully e-commerce. You could purchase prints, or if anybody's interested in an original piece of artwork, you can contact me on there about it. I'm in the process right now of actually moving my website from one server to a different provider right now. So you might see some changes in the next few weeks, but basically I'm basically revamping my website and moving it over to a different server host, basically. But I also have a Facebook page. If you want to follow me on Facebook, I have an Instagram, Mark Maritato Art on Instagram, Mark Maritato Historical Artist on Facebook, and then you have the YouTube channel, which is A Brush with History, and I believe that's it. Yeah, if anybody's interested in asking me any questions about my art, I'm always happy to answer questions. Or if anybody's interested in original artwork, I take work on commission. So yeah, if anybody's interested in a specific event that they want painted, just contact me and we'll talk about it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful. And no worries, everyone. I'm going to link all of that in the show description. And so you'll be able to find all those links there. And so, wow, that's exciting. There's a lot to look forward to for your work, but I can't wait to check out some of these things. I can't wait to check out that Harvest of Death video, but I also can't wait. I look forward to all of the future projects you have going on. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I always post everything on my website, so everything that I've ever, pretty much almost everything that I've done that I like. But
you're your own biggest critic.
Well, every artist is, but
yeah.
Pretty much most of the body of work that I've done, is on there. I will mention also that I received a commission a few years ago to paint 16 paintings for the Valley Forge National Historical Site.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in seeing those paintings, they're on my website too. I have a little YouTube video about them too, if anybody's interested in seeing that. So.
And they're all on display there at Valley Forge too. Like, so if you go there,
not the original paintings. What they did was they asked me to paint these paintings, and they asked for just digital files. But what they did was they took the files and they enlarged them to wall-sized murals. So when you go there today, you see my artwork all over the museum. It's all,
nice.
It's all printed on the walls, basically. So, but
yeah.
I have the original artwork now, and my hope is I'm talking to a couple places now. What we're trying to do is to get those original pieces on a kind of traveling exhibit, so that people can see the original pieces.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'm talking to a couple of museums and institutions about doing that. So look out for that in the future as well.
Nice. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, so much going on. And so, Mark, thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed this. And I love, for any of my favorite things, whether it's a favorite movie or a favorite piece of art, I want to know the behind the scenes. And so I think you gave a good idea of the whole behind the scenes effort it takes in recreating just even the image behind you. And so, and all the many pieces you've done. So I appreciated this. And I appreciate your knowledge of regiments too, and that passion that you put into your work. And so this was a great opportunity. And so I want to thank you again for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. This is fun. I really, anytime that I get to talk, the Civil War is my favorite subject. And anytime I get to talk about that subject and even regiments. And one of these days, if you ever want to do one about Zouaves too, I'm really a big Zouave nut. So
nice. We'll do a timeline. We'll just go through. We'll do Zouave roulette or whatever. We'll go for the whole.
Those types of regiments. I'm also big in the New York State militias and the militia.
Oh yeah.
Very, very fascinating period.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I do this art is to bring this era, more of this era to people, because I don't think people understand, that some of these regiments were, some of these Confederate regiments were dressed in blue, and some of these Union regiments were dressed in gray. Ulysses S. Grant's original regiment. I think it was I don't know if it was the 19th Illinois. It's an Illinois regiment.
I think so.
It was the 19th Illinois.
Yeah.
Their original uniform was a gray uniform with these gray Kossuth type hats with red, white, and blue tassel hats.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, this is like so.
There you go. There's your next regimental study.
Well, it's going to be one of them.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But wow. No, that's great. I love the attention to detail there, and bringing attention to the forgotten, and the things that are overlooked. And so, wow.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really had a great time, and I really appreciate you, interviewing me. And, if anybody ever has any questions, you could always ask me. I'm always happy to answer questions if anybody has them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, I want to thank you for joining me, and I thank everyone for listening and watching, and And I hope this maybe inspires some young artists too, by the way, to keep pursuing your dreams there and keep up the works. And so thank you all. Stay tuned for more episodes this season. And until next time, have a good day, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.